Before I dive into the story, let me set the scene a bit. I was staying at a charming cottage in Ontario, part of a small community with 12 cottages in total. They were arranged in a semicircle around a lovely park with tall trees, a small playground, and a picnic area. The cottages were also near a beautiful lake where people could swim, fish, and canoe. During our stay, my older brother and I befriended a kid named Brandon, who was about 14 years old. Brandon often wandered off on his own and preferred hanging out with us rather than his family. As a young kid, I couldn't understand why someone wouldn't want to be close to their parents. I was a bit of a goody-goody, always following the rules and staying out of trouble. I didn't like Brandon much because he was a troublemaker. But since my brother was friends with him and I looked up to my brother, I went along with whatever they did. One night, Brandon suggested sneaking out. Naturally, my brother was up for it, and since we shared a room, I had no choice but to tag along. Initially, we just hung out in the park, enjoying the quiet night and the cool breeze. But soon we got bored and wanted to do something more exciting. I suggested calling it a night, but the older boys ignored me. Brandon proposed exploring the woods, and despite my protests, we set off into the darkness with only the faint glow of Brandon's phone to guide us. The woods weren't too dense, and we could still hear the distant hum of the highway. After a short walk, I wanted to head back, but my options were limited. Either walk back alone in the dark, or stick with them. After a while, I noticed the woods had gone eerily silent. No crickets, no owls, not even a breeze. I pointed this out, and we all stopped to listen. After a few seconds of complete silence, my brother, sounding annoyed, told me to be quiet because he was trying to listen. I was confused and told him I hadn't made any noise. Then he mentioned the heavy breathing, comparing it to a dying pig, and told me to keep it down. Just as I was about to argue, I heard it too. Heavy, labored breathing. I whispered that it wasn't me, and my brother looked at me with wide eyes. The breathing grew louder and more excited. Above us, 2 lights glowed brightly, swinging gently from side to side. We were all fixated on them, unable to look away. Suddenly, a chilling moan pierced the air, sending shivers down our spines. It sounded like someone who had smoked for years, struggling to let out a scream while gasping for air. We started running, hearing branches breaking and trees shaking behind us. Whatever it was seemed to be in the trees. I couldn't run fast because of my small feet, and soon pain shot through my legs, forcing me to stop while my brother and Brandon kept running ahead. I dove into a nearby bush to hide, but luck wasn't on my side. It was a thorn bush. Within seconds, I was covered in cuts and scratches. I had to bite my lip to stop myself from crying out in pain. As I sat there trying to stay quiet, I heard something heavy land on the forest floor nearby. From my hiding spot, I saw the 2 lights from before, shining into a small clearing. But these weren't lights, they were eyes. The creature was about 7 feet tall, skinny, with dark gray skin and long arms ending in claws. It stood there for a long time, searching for me. I stayed hidden until I saw the sun rising, then mustered all my strength and ran towards the direction of the cabin. I didn't care about the bleeding or the burning sensation in my legs as I ran. Eventually, I stumbled onto a bustling highway. The next thing I knew, I woke up in a hospital bed surrounded by concerned faces. Apparently, someone had spotted me and called for help. When I tried to tell them what happened, no one believed me. My brother made it home and explained what happened, and a search party had been organized before they received the call about me. It's been over 7 years since those terrifying events, and I've spent countless hours scouring the internet for any information that might help me identify that mysterious creature. My name is Alan, and I love being outdoors. I try to hike at least one new trail every year. My girlfriend Andrea and I found an interesting trail not far from our home called Bear Creek Trail. According to the guidebook, it had beautiful scenery, so we packed our bags with water, snacks, and a first aid kit and set off early in the morning. The sun was shining, and we were excited for the day. The trail was rough with lots of rocks and tree roots, and it was clear not many people had used it recently. It had yellow plastic squares on every 10th or 11th tree to mark the way. We were having so much fun that we didn't notice when the plastic markers disappeared. However, we didn't panic since we were experienced hikers with plenty of food and water. We decided to turn around and go back the way we came, but everything looked the same, and we got confused. After walking for about an hour, we reached a clearing with a little cabin in the middle. As we got closer, I saw tire marks near the front of the cabin, but no cars. I suggested waiting for the people to come back and help us out. Andrea suggested checking if anyone was inside. I knocked on the door, but no one answered. Andrea peeked through the window and looked scared. When I looked inside, I saw a pile of money. Just then, we heard a car approaching fast. Andrea and I ran into the woods just as a black truck came into the clearing. We hid and watched as two men got out of the truck. They were talking, but we couldn't hear what they were saying. One of them must have seen our footprints because he pointed right at us. We ran as fast as we could, eventually making it back to the trail in our car. We went back with the police, but when we got there, the cabin and truck were gone. They never caught those guys, and I have no idea what they were doing there, but I don't want to find out. This happened about 2 years ago before the pandemic. My mental health and relationship with my parents were not good, so I often felt alone and misunderstood. To make things worse, a good friend, who I had gone on a few dates with, left the city. I felt numb and empty, unable to process the loss. Eventually, I started having terrible dreams. Although I can't remember everything that happened in them, one thing was always the same. The room or place I was in would get darker and darker. It felt like a dark haze creeping into my vision. The entire room would go dark, similar to the scene in Lord of the Rings where Gandalf gets mad at Bilbo. In my dream, it felt even darker and heavier. I would start to feel a cold, heavy sensation in my stomach along with complete terror. Then, if there were people in my dream before, they would suddenly vanish, or they'd all start staring at me with blank, lifeless faces. Having a bad dream once is scary, but this happened every time without fail. If the people didn't disappear, they'd be staring at me, and then this strange feeling would come. If you've ever had a limb fall asleep and felt that strange pins and needles sensation, it's sort of like that, but worse. It feels like something is grabbing me tightly, squeezing so hard it's crushing me. Sometimes, it feels like it's focusing on my throat and choking me. I feel scared, like I'm surrounded by darkness, and there's often a loud buzzing noise in my head, like static on a TV mixed with the sound of cicadas. It makes it hard to think, impossible to talk, and totally impossible to fight against. This continues until I manage to break free and wake up. But the fear doesn't always stop there. Sometimes I'd stay awake for an hour or two, unable to go back to sleep because if I tried, the dream would just start again from where it stopped. In 2021, I broke off contact with my parents and went through tough living situations and big life changes. I ended up living with my best friend, Amelia, who had a small cabin in the countryside. Amelia is very religious and a wonderful person. I slept in a small loft on a tiny mattress. One night, while Amelia was away babysitting overnight, I was alone in the cabin trying to rest. It had been over a month since my last bad dream. Usually my dreams take a little time to get going, but this time it was like being thrown into a movie without knowing what's happening. Everything happened fast. I remember stumbling out of the cabin, jumping into my Jeep, and speeding down the dark back roads. I almost lost control of the car a few times, but I kept going while desperately calling Amelia. I nervously told her I was driving myself to the hospital because I felt really sick, and something bad was going to happen. Her voice started to fade away, replaced by a low, growling voice whispering strange words I couldn't understand. Suddenly, the headlights of my Jeep turned off, and I couldn't turn them back on. My vision was starting to get covered in darkness. For the first time ever in my dream, a big hand reached through my hair at the back of my head. It felt like the palm could easily cover the back of my head, but its fingers still touched my forehead. I could feel claws lightly scratching my skin. The buzz in my ears became a low growl, like a lion but lower. It seemed like the growl was coming from inside me. I couldn't tell if I was hearing it or feeling it in my mind. Suddenly the hand jerked my head up, making me look straight ahead. In the dim light, I saw a dark figure with the head of a ram, slowly getting closer. I couldn't turn my head, close my eyes, or even blink. My eyes felt like they were burning. The car stopped, but I didn't notice until later. As the dark figure approached, the growl got louder, turning into a shrill scream. I felt like it was trying to tear my soul apart. Suddenly, I found myself sitting on a chair in the middle of a dark room. A spotlight shone on me, and I couldn't see anything around me. I was alone, or at least I thought I was. Then, I felt that strange presence again. It felt like my insides were being twisted. I started seeing images flash before my eyes. My family, friends, and that friend I had lost. Every image felt like a stab in the heart. Finally, I saw the dark figure again, but this time it was closer. I could see its eyes, dark, hollow, and filled with rage. It reached out its hand, and I felt a cold, sharp pain in my chest. I couldn't breathe. The pain got worse, and I felt like I was being torn apart. Then everything went black. I woke up in my bed, drenched in sweat and gasping for air. The room was silent except for my heavy breathing. I looked around, trying to reassure myself that it was just a dream, but the fear wouldn't go away. It felt too real. Since then, I've been scared to fall asleep, worried that the dream will come back. I haven't told anyone about it, not even Amelia. I'm trying to figure out what's happening to me, but I'm scared of what I might find.